The summer sun had a way of painting everything golden in that valley, the kind of golden that whispered of secrets hidden in the land long before men thought they could tame it. I had lived there most of my life, watching the lake breathe with the seasons, watching its mirror-like surface rise and fall as naturally as a chest expanding with air. It was my lake, passed down from my grandfather, who had bought it for pennies when no one thought it was worth more than a flooded pit. He had known better. He had fished it, studied it, respected it. And by the time it came to me, I had memorized every ripple, every trickle, every dangerous truth of that water. The truth they didn't know, the truth the HOA was too arrogant to learn, was that the lake wasn't static. It lived. And every summer, as sure as the earth tilted toward the sun, the water swelled, creeping up the banks, consuming the lowland like a sleeping beast stretching after slumber. Anyone who lived there knew to build away from its shores, to give it breathing room, or else the water would take back what was claimed. But arrogance blinds men faster than darkness. The Homeowners Association, a collection of self-proclaimed developers with more money than wisdom, decided my lake was their crown jewel. They wanted a colony, exclusive waterfront homes, they called it. At first they came politely, all pressed suits and fake smiles, offering to buy me out. They waved papers, promises of profit, numbers I couldn't care less about. But I wasn't selling. That lake wasn't just land. It was bloodline. It was legacy. It was the rhythm of my life. No deal, I told them, as firm as the mountains ringing the valley. This lake stays as it is. They didn't like hearing no. So they found a loophole. My lake was mine, yes, but the far side of the valley, the land sloping down toward it, wasn't. They bought it cheap from families who hadn't respected it the way mine had. Then, against every warning from the old-timers who still remembered floods, they broke ground. Heavy machinery screamed through the valley like monsters, tearing into earth that should have been left alone. In less than a year, 29 houses rose on the far bank, each one boasting of luxury waterfront living. They paved roads, planted manicured lawns, built docks that jutted into my lake like splinters. They even put up signs, "Private community, HOA rules apply." The arrogance of it burned me. My lake, claimed by them as a backdrop, like it was theirs to flaunt. I watched from my cabin up the ridge, watched as they moved in with their SUVs, their barking dogs, their loud pool parties. They didn't know the lake yet, didn't know how it watched, didn't know what it remembered. But I did. When spring turned to summer, I began my quiet vigil. I didn't need to lift a hand, not yet. Nature had its own way of punishing the arrogant. The snowmelt began, trickling down from the mountains, small at first, a whisper in the creeks, then louder, fuller, until the creeks sang like a choir pouring their voices into the basin. The lake swelled, slowly, patiently. The HOA president, Richard, a man with a square jaw and a sharper tongue, came strutting onto my land one day, his shoes sinking in mud he didn't expect to find. He told me, "We've got plans, big ones, a community center, docks, maybe a marina. This lake is about to be something special." I stared at him. "It already is something special." He smirked like I was an old fool clinging to relics. "Progress doesn't wait for nostalgia." Progress. That was their word for theft. By June, the water had reached their pristine lawns. I knew it would. I had measured it for years, carved notches into trees as the water crept higher each summer. But they, in their arrogance, had built too close. Their docks were swallowed first, then their fire pits. By July, the edges of their yards squelched with every step, the grass yellowing under the suffocating water. Complaints started. HOA meetings grew heated. They blamed me, of course, said I had manipulated the lake, as if I held the moon and its tides in my pocket. They accused me of releasing water upstream to flood them out. Richard even brought the county inspector, demanding I fix the problem. The inspector, an old friend of my father's, just shook his head. The lake does this every year, always has. Anyone who built there should have known. But the HOA didn't want truth. They wanted control. So they tried intimidation. Trucks parked at the edge of my property. Strangers trespassing onto my property snapping photos of my cabin. One night I found spray paint across my fence. Sell or drown.
That was when I decided I'd had enough of patience. If the lake's lesson wasn't clear yet, I'd help sharpen it. You see, I knew something they didn't. The lake wasn't just swollen by snowmelt. Beneath its surface, channels twisted like veins, fed by springs hidden under the valley floor. My grandfather had taught me where they ran, how they carried water underground until it bubbled up in force. He had shown me old diagrams, yellowed maps from surveyors who abandoned the land when they realized they couldn't control it. The HOA wanted control. They had paved over what they didn't understand, and that gave me my opening. On a night when the moon was thin and shadows cloaked the valley, I hiked down to one of those forgotten channels. With tools my grandfather left me, I worked in silence, breaking open the earth where the HOA had foolishly built their storm drains. They thought those drains would keep their streets dry. They didn't realize those very channels connected to the underground veins of the lake. All it took was a little redirection, a little engineering, and the water would find its way back into the homes that never should have stood there. By late July, the rains came. Heavy, pounding storms that turned the creeks into torrents. The lake swelled higher, higher than it had in a decade. Water rushed into the HOA's drains, but instead of saving them, it betrayed them, spilling back into basements, flooding their manicured streets. I watched from the ridge as their paradise drowned. Lawns turned to swamps. Swimming pools overflowed, indistinguishable from the lake itself. Foundations cracked. Porches sagged. Their 29 dream homes became islands in a nightmare. And through it all, I stayed silent, my cabin untouched on high ground, safe as it always had been. The HOA panicked. They brought in engineers, sandbags, pumps. Richard stormed into my yard one night, mud up to his knees, screaming that I had caused it. "You knew," he shouted, voice cracking with fear. "You planned this." I looked at him, calm as the stars above. "No, Richard, the lake planned this. I just didn't stop it." He lunged at me, fists clenched, but his feet sank into the sodden ground and he fell face first into mud. I didn't help him up. By August, the truth was undeniable. Their homes were unlivable. Families fled, taking what they could before the mold and rot consumed everything. Insurance claims were denied. Act of God, they said. The county refused responsibility. And still the water rose. The HOA had wanted to own my lake, to tame it, to profit from it. But they had never learned the first rule of the valley. You don't own the water. You respect it, or it takes what it wants. And as I stood on my ridge watching their empire sink, I realized something. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. My grandfather's justice. My father's justice. The lake's justice. And it wasn't finished yet. The valley carried a silence after the families fled, a silence that felt older than time itself. The only sounds left were the frogs croaking at night and the splash of fish reclaiming the waters that had swallowed 29 proud homes. But silence never lasts long when arrogance still lingers. The HOA wasn't gone, not yet. Richard, stubborn and red-eyed from the ruin, refused to give in. He rallied the few who hadn't abandoned ship, promising to rebuild, to fight, to fix the disaster. He still didn't understand. The land remembers. The water remembers. I watched him from the ridge like a hawk circling prey. His SUV sat half sunken in mud at the end of the ruined cul-de-sac.
He stood on what had once been someone's driveway, barking orders to men in reflective vests. They were pumping water day and night, hauling in gravel, trying to raise the ground above the flood. His voice carried up to me in the humid air. "We'll make this right. We'll drain it. We'll drain the damn lake if we have to." Drain my lake. The words hit like a blade. For generations, that water had fed fish, nurtured trees, kept the valley alive. My grandfather used to say, "The lake gives life, but take from it, and it takes more back." They were about to learn that the hard way. I wasn't one to strike first without reason, but now they threatened the heart of everything I'd sworn to protect. So I started to prepare, not with anger, but with patience, the kind of patience the water itself had taught me. I gathered the old maps again, traced the veins of underground springs with a lantern's glow, my cabin filled with the smell of wet earth and burning oil as I worked through nights. By day, I let them see me, let them sneer and spit in my direction when I walked the ridge road. Rumors spread among the remnants of the HOA that I was cursing them, that I had some unnatural control of the water. They weren't far from wrong. What they didn't know was that every storm gave me more strength. Every raindrop fed the lake's hunger. And deep in the southern bend of the shore, near a stand of black willows, there was an old floodgate my grandfather had shown me when I was barely 12. It was hidden now, rusted, forgotten beneath vines and silt. But it still worked. It had once been used to divert water into irrigation channels for farms, back when the valley thrived on crops. If I opened it wide enough, the HOA's newly raised gravel berms would mean nothing. I waited for the right night, when thunder cracked so loud it masked the grind of old gears. The storm came fierce, as if summoned by the ancestors themselves. Rain hammered the roof of my cabin, wind whipped the trees sideways. I walked down with a lantern shielded by my coat and found the floodgate half submerged. It resisted at first, but with each heave the metal moaned, then gave way. Water roared like a beast unleashed. By dawn, the HOA's fixes were drowned under torrents of brown, surging lake water. The pump sputtered and died, the gravel walls crumbled, and Richard stood waist-deep in what was once a street lined with mailboxes. I watched him from the ridge as he screamed at the sky, "This is sabotage! This is war!" War. He didn't know the meaning of it. Soon the county sent officials again, men in suits with clipboards, nodding grimly. They told the HOA that rebuilding wasn't feasible, that the land was unsafe, unfit for residential use. Mold, erosion, contamination, the list of failures grew longer with every test. But Richard wouldn't listen. He threatened lawsuits, demanded action. He even tried to sue me, claiming I had manipulated the lake. His lawyer came to my cabin, suit drenched from the marshy slog up the ridge. He served me papers with a trembling hand, as if he knew deep down how futile it all was. The court date came, but the judge laughed them out of the room. "You built on a floodplain," he said. "You ignored warnings. You ignored nature. Case dismissed." I thought that would break them, but arrogance has a way of rotting a man's mind from within. Richard escalated. One night I woke to flames. The fence at the bottom of my ridge was burning, lit by gas and fury. I ran with buckets, stamping it out before it spread. When I looked down the valley, I saw figures running back toward the ruined homes. They had declared their war, and I answered it, not with fire, but with water. The next morning, I hiked to the far ridge where the main creek entered the lake. There, a dam of debris had been building for months. Logs, stones, brush. If cleared, the surge would pour straight into the hollow where the HOA clung to their sinking dream. My hands bled as I pried and pulled, muscles straining until the wall of nature gave way. The flood tore through the hollow like vengeance embodied. Houses cracked apart, walls collapsing as if the earth itself rejected them. The roar echoed for miles, louder than any machinery they had brought to fight it. By evening, 29 homes were no more than skeletons, splintered beams and drowned furniture bobbing in muddy water. That was when the families who had stayed, those who had clung to Richard's promises, finally gave up. I saw them pack cars, crying children, clutching ruined toys, dogs whimpering as they were lifted into trucks. They didn't look back. They didn't dare. But Richard stayed. Always Richard. I saw him standing on the broken steps of what had been his dream house, soaked to the bone, eyes hollow. He was a man stripped of power, yet too proud to admit defeat. For days he wandered those ruins like a ghost. Sometimes I heard his shouts echo up the ridge, curses thrown at me, at the lake, at the heavens. One night the shouting stopped. I found his SUV abandoned by the shore, half submerged, the door hanging open. His footprints led into the water, and then vanished. Whether he slipped, whether he walked willingly, I never knew. The lake doesn't give back what it chooses to keep.
After that, the HOA dissolved. Official notices came in the mail, bankruptcy filings, foreclosure signs planted where manicured lawns are dim. The valley emptied, reclaimed by silence again. Summer turned to autumn, the lake receded as it always did, leaving behind cracked foundations swallowed in weeds. Herons stalked through flooded living rooms. Fish swam under collapsed porches. The land was healing, erasing the arrogance written across it. And I stayed. My cabin stood untouched on the ridge, as it always had, a testament to patience, to respect, to legacy. Sometimes I walk down to the ruins, just to remind myself. 29 homes, once symbols of greed, now nothing more than cautionary tales whispered by the wind through broken chimneys. The HOA had tried to own what was never theirs, and the lake had written the ending they deserved. People ask me when they pass through why I never sold, why I didn't take the money when it was offered. I only smile and point to the water, glittering under the sun like a jewel too old to be owned. You can't buy respect, I tell them, and you can't buy the lake. For me, there was never revenge, only justice. A justice carried not in courts or contracts, but in the rise and fall of the waters, the heartbeat of the valley itself. The HOA thought they had built a community, but what they built instead was their own ruin. And every summer when the waters rise again, I sit on my porch, sip my coffee, and listen. I hear the whispers of my grandfather, the laughter of my father, the voice of the lake. They all say the same thing. Remember. And I do, because the water always remembers.